This is something that I think all of us in the news business need to think about, need to take very seriously. I believe that President Trump is engaged in the most direct, sustained assault on freedom of the press in our history, and I will get to that in a moment. Before you applaud, listen to the rest of this, because I think many of our colleagues in the news business see the president's attacks, his constant bashing of the media, as a rationale, as an excuse to cross the line themselves to push back. And that is a big mistake. I see it all the time on the front page of major newspapers and the lead of the evening news, fact mixed with opinion, buzzwords like bombshell and scandal, the animus of the reporter and the editor as plain to see as the headline. 2 days after Donald Trump was elected president, 2 days, this was the sentence in the lead story in the New York Times. The American political establishment reeled on Wednesday as leaders in both parties began coming to grips with 4 years of President Donald J. Trump in the White House, a once unimaginable scenario that has now plunged the United States and its allies into a period of deep uncertainty about the policies and impact of this administration. There's a lot to unpack in that one sentence. It hasn't stopped since. I know this is going to be controversial, but I came here today from having spent all day at Fox News covering the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the IG report. Some things in the report very supportive of what the FBI did, some of it very critical. We covered it all. One of our fellow networks, CNN, today ignored the IG report, ignored all of the statements about terrible misconduct, perhaps illegality on the part of the FBI in its seeking of the FISA warrants against Carter Page. Now, the last time I checked, CNN was pretty interested in the Russia investigation, but they didn't seem interested in this. The fact is, to be clear, the president has given us plenty to work with, but when we respond to him like that, when we respond with bias, we're playing his game, not ours. We are not participants in what we cover. We are umpires or observers trying to be objective witnesses to what is going on. If the president or anyone we're covering says something untrue or does something questionable, we can and should report it. But we shouldn't be drawn into the fight. We shouldn't be drawn into taking sides, as tempting as that is. We're not as good at it as they are, and we're abandoning the special role the founders gave us in this democracy. Now, let's talk about the president. He has done everything he can to undercut the media, to try to delegitimize us. And I think his purpose is clear, to raise doubts when we report critically about him and his administration that we can be trusted. Back in 2017, he tweeted something that said far more about him than it did about us. Quote, "The fake news media is not my enemy. It is the enemy of the American people." After that statement, retired Admiral Bill McRaven, a Navy SEAL for 37 years, the man in charge of the missions that captured Saddam Hussein and that took down Osama bin Laden, Bill McRaven said this, quote, "This sentiment may be the greatest threat to democracy in my lifetime." Now, I got to say, I was a little surprised by that. Remember, this is a guy who fought the Soviet Union. This is an admiral who fought Islamic terrorism. But when I asked Bill about this was his response. Those threats, the Soviets, Islamic terrorism, those threats brought us together. Both the president and I swore an oath to the Constitution. And the First Amendment to that Constitution is freedom of the press. When the president says the media is the enemy of the people, to me that undermines the Constitution. So I do think it is a tremendous threat to our democracy. Let's be honest, the president's attacks have done some damage. A Freedom Forum Institute poll, associated here with the Newseum, this year found that 29% of Americans, almost a third, of all of us think the First Amendment goes too far. And 77%, three-quarters, say that fake news is a serious threat to our democracy. But on this night, as we celebrate freedom of the press and we commemorate the Newseum, I think we should remember some essential truths. First, ours is a great profession, maybe the best that anybody ever thought of as a way to make a living. Think of it. We get paid to tell the truth. How many people can say that? To cut through all the spin, all the distractions, and to tell the American people what is really going on. What our leaders are really doing, what's happening in our schools, and in our hospitals, in our neighborhoods, and with our environment. I have been blessed to do this for 50 years. I spent a week with Mother Teresa in Calcutta just after she'd won the Nobel Peace Prize. I covered President Reagan for 6 years, going with him to China and the Korean DMZ and covering 4 Reagan-Gorbachev summits. Last year, I interviewed Vladimir Putin in Helsinki just after that summit, and I asked him, why do so many of the people who oppose you end up dead? And I lived to tell the tale. Sure, we take our share of incoming. A couple of weeks ago, President Trump tweeted after one of my interviews, Steve Scalise blew away the nasty and obnoxious Chris Wallace. Afterwards, one of my sons said, nasty? No. Obnoxious? Well, the bottom line is we have seen presidents come and go. We will endure. So will freedom of the press. And so I am confident will the Newseum. Thank you all so much.